Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, the last week of the year. If you're in YouTube and you'd like to join the conversation, you got to go to Zoom, which you'll see a link down below. And if you're in Zoom and you want to join the conversation, you got to join Mokana, which you'll see a link down below. It's just kind of like a little process there. If you see this panel, except for this one that is very odd, this video graph there. If you see this panel and you think you'd like to be part of this panel, and you think that you have something to add, you probably do. And we'd love to have you. You just need to be here by 6:40 in the morning. We do mic checks then. When we do the mic check, once we've done it, we've closed up the panel for the day. So it's important to be here by 6:40. 6 o'clock is when we open the doors, and you can come in here. Can't promise anything. We're dealing with tech and having coffee, and I think this morning we were talking about meditation. So you just never know what's going to happen in the morning before 6:40. But then we go into mic checks. Then we do a general Q&A. 7 to 8 in the morning is the general Q&A. Anything that you'd like to talk about related to media production, virtual production, those types of things, go ahead and put in there. And the best time to think about those questions is just all day. You have something that you don't quite understand, raise your hand, or not raise your hand, but write it down somewhere, put it in your notes, write it down somewhere, and then bring it in the morning. Help us all learn based on what you're trying to figure out. So go ahead and make sure to ask questions now. We got a couple hours to cover. The second hour today, this week is all going to be kind of a little bit of thinking. It's the end of 2020. We're going to think about what worked and didn't work. We're also going to think about what we're going to do in each day going forward. So there'll be a little bit of we're going to kind of think through and brainstorm. Might run a little heavy if we've got a lot of questions, because I don't know if thinking ahead will take an hour, but it might. But we want to talk through it. So think about like what you'd like to learn more about. We're going to turn Mondays into Zoom days, because a lot of people are trying to figure that out. What you'd like to talk about in Zoom, what you'd like to talk about with audio, video, artists, all of those things are things that we want to kind of brainstorm this week to figure out, and then we'll shift gears next week and start doing some of those things. So anyway, think about those and make sure to, if it's a question or a comment for the second hour, make sure to tag it. So you'll see in the new Mokana, you can tag things as second hour. It makes it a lot easier for us to sort. So anyway, that's it. Chris, I sense we have some questions to start working.
We have a few. I have one for the group. How many people catch themselves raising their hand to speak to their family at the dinner table? My wife looked at me. She goes, "What? What are you doing?"
I just got to say, I was listening to a recent episode, and I try to catch up all the time. And when Mickey said, Alex cut to Mickey, and Mickey went, "Oh, sorry, I just forgot to put my hand down." Awesome. Oh, it was still up.
It was still up. Natural reaction.
Okay,
go ahead.
So first question, Jeffrey Reyes from Bronx, New York says, "Alex, could you go over what programs do you have installed on your Mac?"
What programs do I have? Oh, I have so many. I don't know if I could get into. I don't know if what programs would make sense. I can read off a couple of them. People can talk about this, but I do have the Adobe suite. Even though I complain about it a lot, I still have to have one version.
Is it registered
somewhere? Yeah, it's registered. It's I pay some subscription for it. I'm bitter about it every time I see the email come by, but I still have to have one to convert files. I have the Affinity stuff, Designer and Photo. I've got a bunch of Blackmagic, apps that are there that are all connected, pretty much all the Blackmagic stuff. And then of course Blender and Blue Jeans and Cinema 4D and all the Mac apps, Downy 4, which I think that TJ suggested, which has turned out to be super, super useful there. DJ Pro 2, which I aspire to use again, but I haven't gotten around to it. I got it. I was like, I'm going to get back into my old DJ days, and I haven't had time to do that actually. And then, Kindle, Keynote. There's so many. It's kind of hard for me to like list them all off. I'm still into P. so anyway, but what are
no cooking apps?
Spectre. I don't have any cooking apps. I do books for that. So I did learn to make tortillas last night. I made another set this morning. I made a big mess, but they're really more like naan right now. They're not really tortillas, but I like them. I think I might give up on tortillas and just stick with the naan. So anyway, but but my non-breakfast was good. Go ahead, Chris, and then Stuart.
If you had, here's a follow-up. If you had the challenge of starting a career over and you could only have one app, what would be the first app that you chose?
Well, it'd be the one app, right?
One app. And you could say, oh, I want, Safari so I can download everything. But the point is, you want to start a career with one app. What would it be?
All right, go ahead, Jason. Then Stuart.
Okay, yeah, I'll totally jump in on that one. Keynote.
I was going to say Keynote. Go ahead, Stuart.
I thought Chris was asking you that question there, Alex, but what I would like to add to the question Jeffrey's posed is, does he mean the Mac that you use every day or the M1s that you're now sending out in a kit? Because that would be an interesting set of information.
Well,
what goes in the kit.
I was going through what I have every day, but the M1s really just have the Blackmagic control software for the camera. They have Wingman, Zoom, and then they have the Meraki software installed, but that's it. I mean, like other than what comes with them, we don't want them to have anything else. So that's all the M1s have. Go ahead, Jason, and then Mike.
I'm receiving my what are they called? The bidirectionals from B&H today that are doing the camera control with the Mini. I'm wondering if anyone else is expecting receipt of those.
No, haven't gotten them yet. Go ahead, Mike.
So, having worked in Hollywood many years as a caught on tape king, I would have to say Desert Island, one piece of software, VLC, the Swiss Army knife of video.
I think it'd be hard to build a career on it, though. If I was going to build a career on it, I still would lean towards Keynote.
You want to create also.
Yeah, I mean, Keynote, you can just do so much with Keynote. Like you can do so many things in so many different careers with that one app. Is the one that if I had to choose one,
mostly you could pitch ideas and jobs.
I know, exactly. You could pitch ideas and jobs, but you could also build content. I have built things in Keynote that the client said, yeah, that's great. like let's close the deal. And I'm like, this was the animatic. I'm like it'll look much better when I take it into motion. And but I had it all animated and things flying in and going out, and I make whole videos with them with Keynote. It has a lot of tools that are useful. So go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I'll be spokesperson for Chris Fenwick and say Final Cut. Am I right, Chris?
I mean, it's a good tool, but I have seen at the recent Final Cut conference, one of the speakers did his speaker support graphics. He actually built them in Final Cut. He was just moving the timeline down. It's like, I would recommend you learn a little Keynote. I know you're an editor, but it's not that hard.
I once saw somebody do a presentation, like literally the whole presentation with like graphics and stuff like that in Excel. There was part of it that was really impressive and part of it that was really pathetic, and it was kind of like right on that on that razor edge of being really impressive and really pathetic, and all at the same time. So anyway, all right, next question.
Grant Whitehead says, has anyone used the Logitech PTZ Pro 2? And there's a link there.
Go ahead, Paul, and then
Guy
Peter.
is showing it.
No, but I've used the Logitech PTZ BCC 950, which is way less money, and it does an excellent job. This must cost a fortune, this PTZ Pro 2.
How much is it?
I have no idea. How much is that?
Anyone?
It's about $700 last time I looked.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, 1,400 Australian, but yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
it's very good.
It's
Is
currently
that the
back ordered.
conversion? Is the conversion rate 2 to 1?
Yeah,
It's about 60 cents in the dollar or something about at the moment. But I would expect for that amount of money that the PTZ Pro 2 would be 4K, not 1080.
But it has for $800 though, it has a 10x. I assume it's a 10x optical zoom, which would be kind of slick. So, yeah, it's interesting.
I'm looking for an event where I want to want to put 5 of them in the back of a room just so I can control them. And if I can do it all through Zoom, I think this would be pretty sweet.
Yeah. No, I haven't. It looks interesting. It'd be fun to play with. But I haven't played with it yet. Now, Peter?
I was going to say, I have actually one downstairs in my living room. I use it to talk to my grandkids.
And do you like it?
I do. It's got a real simple remote. I mean, because it's a handheld remote, right? I've not used it for, Zoom and things like that. We use it for FaceTime. It works perfectly good for FaceTime.
Do you have any, what kind of, outside of the remote, what kind of control do you have? Do you have remote control of it through other means?
I've not tried. I'll be honest with you. I set it up with a older Mac Mini.
Right.
I mean, and frankly, a wireless headset, gaming headset, and I can talk to my granddaughter that way. And I don't have to be stuck in my study. I mean, that was the impetus for doing it.
I mean, it does look like hopefully it would be, you'd be able to control it, because it doesn't look like it has any kind of like Visca or anything else. You would need to control it through that controller or through Zoom if Zoom supports control of it. But it is Zoom certified. I don't know what that means, but
yeah, I mean, when I stepped off the air, I went and grabbed the remote. I couldn't grab the camera because the camera's hooked up downstairs. But I mean, this is, I don't know of a way to control it through software. I could be wrong, but I don't know.
Well, our challenge for you will be to bring it up for tomorrow.
No,
unplug
thank
it, plug
you.
it in this. Let us play with it. Let's see if we can remote control it. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'd say in that same price range to be looking at the BirdDog P100. It has the same USB control. I've controlled this one through Zoom, so it's USB 2.0, HDMI, SDI, and full NDI. So it's worth looking at if you're in that realm.
And that BirdDog is about $800.
No, it's way more than that. It's like 1,200. I want to say. Let's click the buy button and see what happens. Yeah, and they just put up a post on LinkedIn that the NBA used it for one of their.
Use my address.
Use your address.
I mean, if you're gonna buy it.
Why isn't it popping up? Hey, come on. I don't know. Is it gonna show? Nope, it doesn't link directly. I'll have to look it up.
I have one of those actually sitting here.
You have a P100? It's $15.99.
You've just pulled an Alex. You've just pulled an Alex on me, where you've doubled the price of what I was looking at.
You didn't even see it coming.
Well,
It was like
good
you look
idea,
down,
but
next thing you
here's
know, like, how did I
another
spend an
idea.
extra $500 on this? What's going on? All right. Next question.
That was funny. Pre-show, TJ Asher from Minneapolis, Minnesota, says the pre-show discussion had a comment about drop frame or non-drop frame. Can we get an explanation of what that means?
So if you're doing time of day with the 2997, you're going to actually, if you do non-drop frame, if you keep all the frames, you'll actually fall out of time of day. So your timing will drop out over the time of the day because you have to drop a frame. I want to say it's every 50 seconds to keep it lined up. So with the time of day, so time of day has to be drop frame if you want to keep it that way. So trucks and live events and everything else typically are on drop frame. But then you have non-drop frame, which says we're just going to keep all the frames. And it's the time code. It's not changing the frames. It's the time code. But things that are tied to that time code, if it keeps on keeping them aligned, it will throw things. So things will come out of sync. If some things are in drop frame and things are in non-drop frame, you'll lose sync because it's keeping track of that time code. Go ahead, Mickey, and then Sky.
Yeah, for 2997, if you look at a clip or a file that's at 2997, the TRT of that file, say, for example, 10 minutes is actually less than 10 minutes in real time. So for live situations wherein you want to accurately compare those clips or those files to actual like real clock time, what is done is they they use a drop frame time code in the metadata. It doesn't change anything in the image. It's just the label of the frames. And yeah, what Alex was alluding to, every 10 minutes, every minute, 2 frames of labeling are dropped, except for the 10th minute. And that allows, what do you call this? 20 footage that is 29 and 972 show up at the same rate as real clock time.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Sky, and then Jason.
Okay, thanks. So at again, the origin of things, we're dealing in how many things happen within a certain amount of time, and that there's a reason, and I wish Courtney or maybe Jason can help the origin of this, but you'll notice the little difference is the little tail at the bottom. That's the identifier between a regular frame and a drop frame, and it is to help synchronize your audio and your video together. I can't remember the exact origin of why we're not all 30 frames. I guess it's probably the same between why it's not metric and why it's standard measurement.
Fenwick is like completely grinning, so I'm not going to get into the origin. But suffice it to say,
I'm laughing at Sky's comment about the little tail as a descriptor for a semicolon.
That I was going to cover. So it's usually hours, minutes, seconds, frames, and the dead giveaway of when you're in drop frame is that the frames are a semicolon. For those of you that are wondering, drop frame does not drop frames. I'll add it to that and leave it at that.
There's probably a whole second hour on drop versus non-drop that could be done. All right. Next question.
Yeah, I was just laughing at the semicolon. Maranatha Spanish Church from Grand Rapids, Michigan asks, what's the best way to pull audio off of the house mixer to streaming using the utility out to send to a small mixer? Sound is too low most time. So with the small mixer, I can have a high level without feedback. I think this is a general like gain staging, it has to sound good in the house and has to sound good on the stream question.
Go ahead, Greg, and then Stuart and Jeffrey.
Yeah, traditional wisdom when you're dealing with a live and a broadcast situation at the same time is you have to keep your channel faders up and fully modulating, and then work that as a subgroup for your or send your feed to an aux. Either way, you can send the auxes to the house or you can send the auxes to the stream. Well, but the important thing is to keep enough level in your pre-phase, and then control the volume of the house with the master. Very frequently what people do is they put the master up to 0 because that's where they think it's supposed to live, and then they get very low signal coming through the actual channels. And when you feed those channels out to the to your broadcast mix, you're very, very low. So you either have to go to another mixer, or you really shouldn't have to go to another mixer. You should be able to do all this within one mixer. Does that make any sense?
It does. And I think that the other thing is, and I think a lot of people are going to comment on it, but the fact that those mixes oftentimes need to be different to really do it well is that the mix that you're going to put out and the mix that's going to be in the room, and the more reverberant, this is the challenge with church, is the more reverberant that the space is, the more the mix will be different because it's creating an entirely different, I listened to this great thing on NPR. I don't remember where it was, talking about how the chants that are done, that the very old chants were actually designed for specific cathedrals, because they were taking advantage of the reverberation of so things that did, and they said don't make any sense if you don't put the reverberation back in. So they do these impulse records where they pop a balloon and they calculate that, and when they put that back in, it starts to make sense again. So the reason I say that is that a room for a person mixing is going to be a lot different than a person listening with headphones. And so you can get a basic output that tells people kind of what happened in the room. But this is the standard challenge with hybrid events. It's just that it's two different worlds that you're trying to merge. Go ahead, Greg, follow up on that, and then we'll go to Stuart and then Jason.
Yeah, quickly. And this is one of the advantages of using a digital mixer, is that you can set a mix for the house, including all the EQ that you want, all the compression that you want, and you can set up an entirely separate mix through an aux or whatever, to your feed. So it's just convenient.
Well, and one thing you'll hear us say all the time, audio is the most important part of every live stream. So it's worth thinking about what it would take to figure out how to make it great. Stuart, then Jason, then Grant, then Jeffrey.
Okay, let's think about the point of view.
And we're going to have a lot of people give 2
limited.
cents, so we'll go relatively quickly because we have a lot of people that can contribute.
Yep. Let's talk about the budget end of things, because a lot of community groups can't spend a huge amount of money. They'll have fairly simple equipment. A lot of things for band mixers and pubs and what have you, don't forget that a lot of instruments like drums do not end up in the house mix. So just be aware of that. You might need to add in a room mic or the like. But for those small basic mixers, you probably want to look at taking the tape out of the mixer. Unlike the aux sends and the main mix out, there's no real level control on the tape out. You're just getting each of the instruments according to how you've set your main faders on each channel, right? They don't fade up and down with the main output, so you won't lose it when won't lose the audio that you're getting from the mixer when the main output is faded to the speakers. That way you're getting line level out, and all you really need from that is a USB, like an audio converter from line level to USB. You're done.
Jason and then Grant.
I'll pick up where Stuart left off. So it's line level, but it's line level at -10. So that is somewhat important to know. Also, if that is going to be your live output, and I assume that that's what you meant, the utility out, I'm going to assume, is the RCA output. You might want to try, leveling one of those at a time. If you're having problems standardizing it, start with your left channel only and see what it does. Start with your right channel only, see what it does. Because if you're going into a balanced input, things can get weird fast.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Grant, and then Jeffrey.
So I've done exactly what you're talking about in a church environment, and I see that you have got a second mixer that you're going into, and so I would encourage you. What we don't know is if you have digital mixers or if they're analog, and let's assume they're analog. I would be trying to get the auxiliaries, use as many of those auxiliaries as you can on the main board. And try to make some stems essentially. And so what I know also of that type of content is that often they're not professional singers, very commonly, and it might sound okay in the room, but the level that the singers are being pushed out at in the room is to account for all the room sound. And so they would normally be very hot in the mix and does not sound good coming over on a live stream. And so ideally, you kind of create your own stems as being individual groups, and maybe you can just mix 4 or 5 different faders where vocals is one of those, and you can pull it down. And so that way you sort of get much more control. You have a much nicer mix. Use those auxiliaries on the main board and you do a sub mix to go out on the stream.
Go, Jeffrey.
Oh, I conceded. But what I will add is that if you can use a wireless headset, get out of the room and listen to what it is and what you would like to hear, then you can come back and take a mix. But everything that's been said, awesome.
Yep. Go ahead, Garrick, and then Mickey.
Yeah, at the church I work at, we solved this problem by adding a whole nother mixing board to it. Audio is not my strong suit, but we have a guy in a studio who mixes for online only, and he sets all the gain stages and everything, and then he sends those to our front of house mixer, who's our A2 guy, and he mixes for the house off of that, and it's been working really well for us. But audio to live stream seems so simple, but it's so complicated to get something really high quality. It's hard
to do it well. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is going to be something that's really, really important, I think, for churches, because I think this is going to be, and for all organizations, is because, again, we're going to keep saying it over and over again, audio is the most important thing. And, you know, it may be a long time before we have full congregations, you know, back in one place. I mean, it could be a long time. So it's not going to be April. Like we're just hold on.
Can Garrett give us perspective of his size of church? Because that's critical.
What size is the church, Garrett?
Our auditorium seats 1,500, and pre-COVID we were filling it 3 times a Sunday. And then our online audience is right now, this last Sunday we had about 6,000 unique views.
Right. Yeah. But and those things can happen when you have a compelling program, compelling host, you know, compelling minister, compelling program. But you have to match it with good audio. You know, with good audio, you know, like the video can, you know, you can keep on working on the video, but you have to match it with good audio. Mickey, and then Guy, and then Marty.
Yeah, just building on what Grant was saying earlier. Yeah, and also what Jarek just mentioned. Ideally, you would have separate mixes for each destination. I mean, like, of course, that scales with budget, but in the ideal world, you would have a separate front of house mix engineer. You would also have a separate monitor engineer for the performers. You would also have a separate broadcast mix engineer, and also a separate recording mix engineer. But of course, that scales again with budget. With the difference in loudness of the front of house mix versus the broadcast mix, especially for web, web is so much louder than what you would typically have for a front of house mix. With front of house, they want to utilize as much dynamic range as possible. You can, you know, have those like big bursts of music really loud, and then have really quiet portions. Wherein for the broadcast side of things, you want it more consistent. So that's why you're probably seeing what you see as very low levels coming from the front of house going into your broadcast. So for that, you want to add a lot more compression, and also a lot more limiting in that chain for broadcast. And yeah, if you can get separate aux mixes, maybe a vocal aux, a speech aux, you know, a instrument aux, that would really help you make a separate mix specifically for broadcast.
Good. Guy, and then Marty.
Yeah, I've been going through this every weekend and learning a lot. There's installed house sound at our church, and it's kind of crazy that I can't touch nothing. So I just yanked out the aux bus and stuck my 833 in there and took in the feed, and then I put in a room mic by the organ, so then I can control, because they've surprised me a couple of times with like, oh, we're going to have a pianist. Oh, we're going to have a violinist, and you have zero control. So I brought in my own mic, but now I'm starting to learn that my supercardioid that I love, that's in a nice wooden box, it's all pristine, is probably not the best mic, and I'm starting to think I might want an Omni. I was going to ask, maybe Mickey can help me figure that out with the miking a room, just to kind of add that mix in there, so that, because the lectern mic sounds so dry when, you know, most of the viewers are online, like the congregation's empty, like there's 6 people there, and now there's 150, 200 people online. So what mic would you recommend, Mickey?
I would say it depends on where you can position the mics. Like, say, if you can put it further back of the room, I would probably go with a nice spaced Omni. But if you're closer to the stage, maybe I would stick with those with supercardioids, actually, just to get rid of the bleed from the stage and get more of the actual reflections in the room. Or if you can have both, like 2 pairs, and time align them together, that would sound really good.
Marty, and then Greg, and then Stuart, and then we'll be done.
So it being a Spanish church, there can be a very wide range of between types of services, whether it's a contemplative service, whether there's music, and what kind of music. And how you mix these things will vary from one to another. The general principles are very similar, though, because you need a mix for the room and you need a mix for the broadcast. And they generally will, if you're doing music of any kind, they will definitely be different. If you're just doing speech, and some Spanish churches are more of that, then you can get away with something more simple. But think about investing in audio if you're going to be doing live streaming on a long-term basis. And that's, for most churches, they've found that live streaming they're going to be doing live streaming for a long time because of the additional number of viewers that they're getting from all over the world.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing the folks that are making it work and really putting time and effort into it. We're seeing the number of viewers to start to, they're building a much larger congregation across the board because of it. Go ahead, Greg, and then Stuart, and then we'll move on.
Okay, most of the live events that that I do are kind of tied in with the students, and we're out doing doing something, and typically I'll always get a feed from front of house, and I try to get as many stems as I can so it's not all bundled together. But one thing that I always do is I always hang a pair of room mics up close to the stage, but facing the audience, not facing the stage. You want to face away from the speakers, and it gives you a nice big body of the room. And what it does is it gives you a nice live feel, and it also hides a myriad of small problems of stuff coming from the front of house mixer.
Yep. Yeah.
So that's one way to get around that.
Absolutely. Stuart?
The rep from the Marantha Spanish Church added in the chat, 210 people, solid brick wall at the back, analog mixers. So perhaps we can suggest a decent budget-priced analog to USB adapter that would allow them to get the sound into their streaming rig.
Yep. And there's lots of them. A lot of the analog mixers, you have to tell us what analog mixer have some kind of USB out as well. So if you're trying to stick with the analog mixer that you have, most modern ones will have that. Otherwise, again, you can find some pretty basic, conversions to USB. But I would recommend, if you're worried about how it sounds or how it's working, then you're probably almost at the point where you're going to want to try to get people together and see if you can invest in something that's going to move it to the next level, because it's once you start thinking about it, if you're not thinking about it, you're not ready for it. All right, next question.
Hasmuk says, now that I have my iPhone 12 Pro, I need to play with LiDAR. And he says, I need to play with LiDAR. Can Alex mention the 2 apps he suggested to check out LiDAR? What is the workflow so I can impress my wife with why I needed to buy an upgrade to the iPhone 12 Pro?
My phone is in the other room. I one with LiDAR, and for some reason I can't think of it right now. I know I have a lot of phones floating around, but 3D. Yeah, there you go. 3D scanner app. Sky is showing that 3D scanner app is the one that I'm probably 3D scanner app, and it's the one with the house. There's a couple of them there, and that one is probably the one I played with the most. The other one that I started playing with is the one that Guy had suggested. Guy, where did Guy? The whole thing just yeah. So
it's almost like we're reverting to
Polycam.
I was going to say it's almost like we're reverting to pictographs or like hieroglyphs.
Yeah.
Because whenever you mention an app, you always say
you wonder.
It's the one with the house.
Here's my theory. My theory is that it was all words before, and then the Egyptians just started doing a lot of emojis. Before you knew it, you had hieroglyphics, and then they were like, "This emoji thing has gotten out of control." Like as you look at Twitch, and you realize why the Egyptians went back to text. It's all these emojis going up, and it's just a whole bunch of hieroglyphics. But I think that the hieroglyphics were just emojis. They were a rebellion against the text that was going way too slow. Like, let's these pictures. Come on, guys. And so anyway,
what about Sitescape?
Sitescape
was that?
Yeah, all Sitescape, Polycam, and 3D Scanner are all good. You can definitely impress friends and family, and I haven't found any good use for them yet. So they're not quite there yet. What's cool is you can go out and scan the kitchen and put it in the living room and walk around in it, and it's kind of cool. For people who don't understand what they're looking at, it'll look really cool. If you look at it, you'll see a lot of polygon errors and a lot of texture errors, and incongruent, surfaces. And there's lots of stuff there that I go, well, I can't. And I've done a couple things where I've done quick measurements, like I'll scan something and then I'll go, okay, I need to know how wide is this, and how, like I had to do a measurement of a room that was, and I just kind of scanned it and then went like this, but I felt like the tools to scan it were a little clunky. And so I got really excited about it. And then I have to admit that I kind of put all of those on the back burner for now, going, when I come back to it in a month, it'll be much better. And I did my part. I sent them a whole bunch of long list for each app developer. I sent them a long list of this is what's missing. And then I was like, okay, and then I'm going to let them cook on that for a little while. And then I'll come back in a month and see how much they fixed. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
My 360 robot does a great job in scanning the room. I just wish I could pull that information and put it in my phone.
Yeah, the challenge is that the challenge with the LiDAR right now is that Sitescape is too permanent. So it throws points out, whether they're accurate or not, and keeps them all. So it doesn't throw them away when it realizes it has better data. But 3D Scanner is too temporal, which means that it grabs those points and it just constantly is changing the points. It's not saying, okay, I have pretty high confidence that these are where the points should be. I'm going to lock those and then take things with lower confidence. And so it's a confidence issue that they're not. And so you end up with either way too many points or not enough points. And it's just of them figuring out where that happy medium is. And I just don't think they've figured it out yet. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, you inspired me to use it both on location scouting. So allowed me to take that brain space with me outside of that, going into that physical space. But I also noticed that the distance issue with the phone is like 30 feet. So I tried using it at my church and it just didn't have the height distance. Yep. But again, to create the setting of possibilities in your mind, what if I put the lights here, if I put, the props there, if I put, the perspective of the camera here. So
it's one of those things, like, it's going to be massive. Like, it's just going to be so useful once they get off the hard edges of just being able to go like this. And because we do that with 3D, with real LiDAR scanners, you throw them in, you get one scan, and now you can start placing things and making things work. But it's not there yet. Go ahead, Hosmuk.
Sounds like for now, my wife will remain unimpressed.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, every person that I've shown it to is impressed. As a person who needs to use it, I'm like, oh, I don't know. But I've scanned a whole house with it. Like, I've wandered around. I scanned an entire house piece by piece and got it all into one house that you can move around and you could pop it open and look at it and everything else. So when I got close to it, it looks a little rough, but it was pretty impressive when I, to play with it. Go ahead, Stuart.
Hosmuk, specific to your point, you can use it to measure the size of the rooms. So the next time she wants to decorate, you know exactly how much paint to buy. That way you will save money on not buying excess paint.
There you go. Next question.
Grant says, what are the panelists looking forward to professionally next year?
Anything jumping out of the yeah, go ahead, Hosmuk.
I'm looking forward to becoming a professional.
Go ahead, Jason.
I love that the medical doctor is looking forward to becoming a professional. Like, this, what a great group. I'm looking forward to hopefully a year where many, if not all of us, are vaccinated and some semblance of a return to normalcy.
I don't know if that's professional though, but anyway, Sky.
Well, I've been given a great gift by meeting all of you amazing people and continuing to meet every day. That's pretty outrageous. That would have never happened had COVID not happened. So do I look back on 2020 as a bad thing? It's tough because I've made a lot of really amazing friends that I would have never had the opportunity to before. And then looking forward is I've been given this opportunity with Madeline to do some amazing fun things for a lot of other people. And so how do we bring fun into the world virtually?
Chris?
I'm looking forward to getting back into rooms with real people doing real photo shoots.
Stuart?
I'm expecting that we will slowly start to ramp up to having more gigs happening in Melbourne, but I expect them to have smaller crews, so there'll be a little bit more diversification of the work, and there'll be a few more jobs for everybody, and it'll be very nice to see that happening.
All right, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, so my business partner's sitting in New Zealand, and I don't think he's going to be coming to the United States until 2022 at best. I think by August, once I have my shots, I'll be able to do some sort of travel, which will mean I'll be able to get out. But it'll definitely be a different way to produce the shows because he still needs to be a part of the show. So it'll be a hybrid of Zoom and live production.
Go ahead, Mike.
I'm looking forward to getting 4 teenagers out of my house that are currently doing at-home learning, and it's not. I know you feel my pain, Alex. It's hard.
My kids are extremely well behaved, so for whatever reason, so I'd be happy if they stayed here the whole time.
Can I ship them to you? And
no,
you
you
can
can't.
tame
See,
them,
I spent a lot of time and effort on these ones. So like this.
Yeah, he front loaded the discipline.
Yeah, they are like amazing. You know, everybody who meets them are like, how did they end up that way? And it's like their mother mostly. We spent a lot of time working on it, which has paid off this year. Mickey.
I think hopefully I'm looking forward to being on location more. I don't do it nearly as much now compared to pre-pandemic, and also more diving deeper into Atmos.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited about getting more into Vision and Atmos than I already am, and so playing a lot with that, doing more with all of you. You know, so figuring out where we can take this and have more fun with it. I will admit that I'm pretty committed to not traveling or ever working on a live event again. Maybe I'll show up if I have to, so I'll show up every once in a while, but I've really seen, we were building towards this for a decade. So for me, I just want to run events that are totally virtual. Like I've already started turning down events that mean that there's one set of events that are related to music that I'm showing up for. Like I go when I go to LA, that are that kind of thing. But outside of that, I'm really not interested in traveling. I'm not interested. I spent a decade, crushing myself to be at all these events. And so I got 5 more years with my kids before they go to college. So I'm super committed to not traveling. So my job is to build up a business build up business for 090, build up business for, with all the things that is all like a central location that we're working out of. And everyone that we bring in is a virtual, whether they might have a physical event, but I just want the virtual part of it. I don't want to do the physical part of it anymore. And I think that I don't think that everyone's going to do that. I think that there's definitely companies, but we're starting to see some companies that we're working with that you can see the shine of live events starting to wear off, as they get better. It's not there yet, but there's these sparks of holy smokes, we just had a lot of people show up, or holy smokes, there's people from all over the world, or, and it's not that they're getting ready to give up live events. Well, some of them are. I mean, a couple clients that I have that are like, we're never going back. Like we'll never have more than 100 people in a room ever again for our company, for anything. Like, it's just like, they're just like, this was crazy, so there's some people that are already going down that path. There's a bunch of them that are saying, we're going to go back to normal as soon as this happens. So it's not like it's all going to go one way or the other. And there's other ones that just say, this is going to be a really important segment of what we do is the live, portion of it. The virtual portion is going to be, it was 5% of the market of our execution. It's now going to be 50%. That kind of thing. And so it's not that it's going to so it's going to go everywhere. There's going to be opportunities for everyone to go back to live, depending on how the vaccine goes and everything else, which I'm not super optimistic about. So my whole thing is that I think that there's a real opportunity to build an entirely different kind of business that is just virtual. And I have to admit that that's what I'm most interested in, is all virtual solutions, or the virtual segment of those remote solutions. We've been sending out these kits that keep on getting better and bigger, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so much better than having someone on stage when you look at them. So I'm really sold on the idea of not, but I've been sold on it for a long time. It's not like this changed anything. It's just what I just was crazy in February talking about it. Everyone thought I was nuts. Now I'm less nuts. Well, I'm the same amount of nuts, just the world became nuttier. Marty, and then Grant, and then Jason.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The whole business model of live events has totally changed in a way that would never have been possible before. I mean, some places were doing live recording, but now it's necessary to do live streaming. And if I had approached a music venue before about doing live streaming, very few would have bitten, and they wouldn't have put much money into it. The other thing is that churches have been completely reinvented in how they perform services and how they do virtual services, and now going into hybrid services. And that's going to be with them for a long, long time.
Yep.
It's a whole new
absolutely.
opportunity. So I'm
and
looking
it's
forward
like that.
to.
And what we're seeing in churches, we're seeing in organizations all over. I mean, everyone's realizing there's just a big business there that they didn't. There was a huge market that no one saw. You know, like when what was happening was working, they just didn't see. They didn't look out for the other opportunity, and that other opportunity is blowing up. And I think that eventually it will usurp most of the physical stuff. You know, because it won't. As the technology gets better, it's not that it's going to get rid of it, but it's going to become more and more a bigger part of the business. If you look at some televangelist as an example, they got that a long time ago. Like their market online is a lot bigger than their market than what's happening in the room. Go ahead, Grant, and then Jason.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm really looking forward to more virtual. There's one particular event that's coming up in the first part of the year that's about suicide prevention. So it's really cool to be actually be a part of something that touches a lot of people's lives, and to be able to reach more people than they would have been just in a particular city. And then thinking about all of when someone's triggered in a main session, being able to handle breakout rooms and counseling sessions and one-on-ones and all of that is a really fun challenge to work on. The other thing is with Blue, we've just done 30,000 people in Zoom, which was great out of Vegas. That was totally virtual. And I keep saying, well, sure, we can think about 100,000, but I'm thinking about 1 million. Can we get a million people in Zoom with most of their faces on? And what would that look like? So that's a challenge for this year.
No, absolutely. That's a good challenge. I can't wait to see it. Go ahead, Jason.
Okay, now I need immediately to do the math of 320 by 180 by 1 million. Wow. That's interesting. So to build on what Alex said, it's not that live events are somehow gone. The difference is that they are, 2020 has been a mixed blessing in that collectively, the gestalt that is office hours, but also the industry at large has figured out how to actually do this using the existing technologies we have. And to that end, things that will come back from, not live will be forever changed, no matter how you slice it, period.
I mean, even if you look at just what we're doing right here at this moment, there is, if you had this many people on stage, all the camera shots would be horrible. The camera would be horrible, the audio would be horrible. I've done events with this many people on stage, and it's a nightmare. Like, it's a disaster, and so the ability to include a bunch of people in a conversation, I think is fascinating. Go ahead, Garrick. Did you have your hand up? Nope. Guy.
Yeah, I'm just looking forward to networking more with people and learning more and building up our internal team. We did our first webinar. We have 1080p webinar with Zoom, and we brought out Panasonic's. We borrowed a Panasonic UE150, and having somebody in the other room controlling that with presets, it was amazing. And we brought in John Idelson as a guest speaker. So I've learned a lot of things in this show, especially like starting up 15 minutes early, everything's running smooth. And so it was just this pitter patter back and forth, ping pong kind of conversation, and it just flowed so smooth. So I'm thankful for this group and learning those little things, and I can't wait to do more of it this year.
We just keep on adding to it, 15 minutes. I mean, people start showing up at 2 hours before our show starts, and so just the 15 minutes is like night and day. And it's amazing how few people do that, that it's not like a part of it, but I think that we're learning together how to make that smoother. And I learned, I didn't know anything. I didn't really register rooms until Guy was talking about the rooms, and there's a whole bunch of things that Grant talks about. And so we keep on bouncing ideas off of each other. And I think, that's obviously what I'm looking forward to the most next year, is just continuing to learn with all of you. Next question.
Sky Gleason, right here in the room from Seattle, says, I'm giving my 2015 laptop to my wife. Should I wipe it and start fresh, or back it up and just make her a new user?
TJ and then Jeffrey.
I would back up any important data you have, then wipe it and start over fresh. Give her a brand new experience right out of the box. You'll have a much faster machine overall.
Okay, everyone go really fast if you disagree, because I strongly agree with TJ. Go ahead, Jeffrey, Peter, and Jason. Just real quickly.
Doesn't matter if it's Windows or Mac or Linux. Wipe it, clean it, start it up.
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
I agree completely, other than the fact this sounds like a Groucho Marx "you bet your life" question.
Oh, Jason.
If you're not sure that you're going to need that image ever again or anything on it, Shirt Pocket software does super duper. Do an image and then wipe it.
Yeah, and go ahead, Stuart, and then we'll move on.
Buy her a fresh, fast SSD, put that in the laptop, put your hard drive on the shelf, because I guarantee, even if you think you've backed up all the data, there will be one file you've missed that you will need 6 months from now. Put a fresh disk in it, put a fresh operating system on it, hand her the laptop and let her put whatever she wants on it.
Carbon copy cloner or the Apple backup
Super
software?
duper. Super duper.
Done.
Super duper.
Thank you. That's it. That's the answer.
Yep. Next question.
Next question.
No, we can't hear you, Chris.
How about if I hit that button too? Grant Whitehead says, regarding Disney's Gallery Mandalorian behind the scenes, what do we think of the roundtable set?
It's okay. So here's the thing: is I like the way that they've hidden the cameras. They've got kind of a set up, and they've built it, and they've created negative space that they're putting the cameras into. I've done a lot of roundtables, and so it's I'm kind of obsessed with it. I think that I have an opinion about roundtables, and the way to do them is always an odd number of people. You figure out an odd number of people, and then you put the cameras in the gaps. And so with an odd number of people with the cameras in the gaps, you'll get a straight on shot like we do. If you look at the old Final Cut user groups, they're all done that way. So there's almost always a odd number, and we are shooting gaps between them all. And that allows you to get over the shoulders and everything else, but it really allows you to do these straight ons while everyone's looking at each other. It's a weird way to build it, which they're not doing quite yet. They're still doing the old Hollywood, like I got a camera and I got a slider and I'm moving things around and I'm going to do a thing. And so they do all of that. I think that they would find it to be better to do it what I'm talking about. The only thing we never did was I always wanted to put a camera on a wide track, like a circular track. So it was just going around everybody as they, and then the lighting that we did that really worked, I thought, was we had some hair lights and then we had a huge globe in the center, like a giant China ball. It was an air star, but it would just light everybody with this nice soft light. And for most of the Final Cut user group, you'll find that what I liked about it is it kind of felt like you were in someone's living room. Like it just didn't feel like it was harsh light or it was a studio lighting. It just felt like we were all just hanging out and talking. Stuart and then Jason.
That round table was the thing that I thought was missing from the season 2 makings of. I absolutely loved it because it gave the creative minds behind the show a chance to just speak plainly. And it's probably the first time a lot of the fandom have laid eyes on their most hated foe in the Star Wars universe, that being Ms. Kennedy.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, they're nasty. You should see some of the comments they make about it, and I think she's been doing a pretty damn good.
I've known her for a long time. She's pretty good at what she does. Go ahead, Jason.
Back to the technical part of the roundtable, I wish they would either use lock shot, clean switches, or a slider, because when they try to intermix the two, it doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, I in general, I feel like I would love for them to build. It's just data to put on Disney Plus. Is if you want to put the shiny version of the behind the scenes there, that's great. But you could easily cobble together 3 or 4 hours for every episode of behind the scenes of how it all gets done, and people would just eat that up. There's no reason to. I mean, unless they want to hide things or they want to do whatever, but they could be literally putting out. And I've had this argument about Star Wars related stuff since I used to review a lot of the behind the scenes for Data. When I was doing episode 1. I would get the behind the scenes and I would use it to figure out where in Leavesden did they actually put the pods? Where did they, I mean, how do I, and I have to back engineer that. And so I got to watch a lot more behind the scenes than most people do about shooting Star Wars. And they should just put out 3 hours every episode of just raw. They can make it as raw as they want, cut it up. I mean, because they're shooting a lot. I mean, they have a ton of people and they've got a ton of camera taps. And you put a bunch of wide cameras. People would watch that all day, and so and especially when you're trying to just keep eyeballs and stay relevant. I think the hard part for Disney is that a lot of us still will, maybe not now, maybe they're getting their feet under them, but I delete as soon as I finish the behind the scenes stuff, I just delete my Disney account until Mandalorian comes up again. I don't need it. There's nothing else that they'd put on there. But if they let that stuff go, if they had behind the scenes of all the stuff they're working on all year, I would totally stay subscribed. Good, Grant.
Yeah, so I appreciate Star Wars, but I watch every second of the behind the scenes. And episode 1, one of the best things was just sitting on the shoulder of George as he walked around and said, do this. Oh, how about this? It's just amazing to watch. And
There's
you would
thousands
totally
of hours
watch
of that. By the way, there's thousands of hours of George walking around, because there was a camera.
Every bit of it.
Literally, there was a camera. John Shank and one other person had a camera every time George went into a meeting. Like they captured everything, and then put out almost nothing. It was really.
To what end? What was the purpose of that? Did George just want it?
No, people just, well, the idea was it's just cheap to record it all. You don't know when that magic moment's going to be there, but then everyone just gets into wanting to manage it to a point where it's just telling the story that they want to tell. And, so they get into that, but there's just so much that's there in those behind the scenes. Some of the best behind the scenes, I use behind the scenes a lot in classes. So some of the best ones, in my opinion, are the Lord of the Rings box sets. Have some pretty good ones. I would love to see them still go deeper, but the Lord of the Ring ones are really done. The Criterion, there's a couple Criterion releases that are pretty good. So Armageddon, Traffic is really good. Like the Criterion release of Traffic is worth seeing. And then as far as general releases, The Matrix and The White Rabbit. If you haven't seen The White Rabbit in The Matrix, you got to follow The White Rabbit in the Matrix DVD. And evidently, I talked to the producer who actually worked on that. And he just said it was a huge fight to get that much data into a DVD. They were like, "Why are we spending this money on it?" But literally, the only reason I buy movies instead of renting them is for the behind the scenes. Like, it's the only reason I purchase them. Like I'm buying the movie, and then I'm buying all the behind the scenes. And so I just feel like I get shorted every time I don't see a lot of them, or they're not done well. Go ahead, Sky.
Wall E, listening to the director underneath that talk about the behind the scenes of what it took, the psychology of making that movie, that was very insightful for me.
Yeah, I think that they should have spent more time with Ben Burt, given that he carried half a film with sound effects, half a film, and didn't get
no
Oscar.
Kidding.
Didn't get an Oscar for that because he's already won too many. That's what I was told. He's already won too many Oscars, so they wouldn't give him another Oscar. I literally, that was the last Oscars I ever watched. I was done. Like when Ben Burt didn't get an Oscar for that, I was like, this is all a bunch of crackpots. I'm done. Anyway, so next question.
Chris Comfort from New York, says, I have an inexpensive Samsung 40-inch 4K HDR LED TV. Wow, a lot of letters. As my second monitor, and I have some burn-in. Before replacing it, is there any standard practice to help remedy the burn-in?
Go ahead, Jason.
Yes, and this will probably not be successful, but I'll tell you anyway. If you take white and roll to black, and you do that for a few hours, you might have some luck at very least kind of wear leveling it. But for the most part, if it's inexpensive, I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably not. I don't know. What does everyone else think?
Yeah, the TV will have a correction system within it, or it won't. A cheaper one won't have it, but the newer versions of the LEDs have their own correction setting. So you go into it and you set it into a cycle, and you let it run all night, and it will often fix it. But I've never seen it in anything smaller than a 55-inch LED, and only in the last 2 or 3 years. so it was when, if it's any older than that or any smaller than that, it's not, they should put it in all of them, but that's the issue. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
The only thing that I can think of if it doesn't have that that option is to actually, if you can invert the image and then set that image on the screen and let that burn in, then you'll end up with a lighter video signal, but the burn in will be gone.
And for those of you listening, LED and especially OLED burn in, we've lost a lot of we've lost a couple monitors. We've lost, just so you know, I've worked in really high-end facilities where they mess that up. It's a really easy thing to mess up. So don't make yourself wrong. I've seen $5,000 monitors ruined overnight because someone left the time code on. Like someone left the time code on the video. And so that it's a really easy thing. They're really great monitors, but it's really easy to blow them in a couple hours if you're not careful. The newer ones are a little bit more robust, and the higher end ones tend to be, but we think about it a lot with what we're doing. Go ahead, Mike.
So are we talking about freeze frames? If you have a monitor up and you've left it freeze frame for hours, or if it's just continuously running with time code at the bottom or something.
Pixels at the same intensity for a long period of time. That's all it is. It's so it's not freeze. It can be freeze frames, but it can be usually it's some kind of like if you run an OLED LED and you leave it on Bloomberg or you leave it on CNN or whatever, you're toast. You'll toast those out. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I have this annoying burn-in of your face on my monitor. It's been there for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, exactly. All right, next question.
TJ Asser says, my wife has language CDs from a professor with horrible in-caps audio. Her description, I love this, TJ. It sounds like he's in a box in a cave with a jet engine going on outside. Is there software I can use to help clean up the voice audio so she can actually hear the professor? If so, what? Note, I have Logic, Audio Hijack, Audacity, blah, 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 Waves. I'm willing to buy other stuff, Isotope RX, blah, blah, blah.
Jason?
It's just a matter of how much time you're willing to dedicate to this. I would say RX.
You must be really committed. You're really committed to her getting this. He must be really good, a really good professor with a really bad mic.
Well, it's Japanese, and so she's trying to learn from the professor, and he is Japanese from Japan, and so he's very precise on certain enunciations because there are subtleties to the language, but he thinks his audio is fantastic. It's not. So yes, I want to get it really good.
So RX8 Advanced, I would go there. The problem is because you don't know Japanese, if you over filter this, you might not know that you got it wrong. I don't know if anyone's had to deal with that, but like I would worry about the speech pieces that you're missing.
Go ahead, Stuart, and then Mickey, and then Chris. And we're going heavy because we went really long. We're going to speed up here in a second, so try to answer quickly.
At some point, the amount of effort you put in will be, what is it? There's more effort than you'll get results from. That's the one. Thank you, Jason. And it would actually be more profitable for everybody if you turn around to the professor and say, hey, I'd like to come in and record a session with you and do it properly and produce new DVDs for you.
Is the professor in the United States or in Japan?
No, he's in the United States, but he's one of these people who I've been doing this for years. I know what I'm doing.
And it's super. I can say as someone who's done a lot of work in Japan, helping him could ruin your relationship with the professor.
Yeah,
that in that culture, at least that's my impression of that culture, is even suggesting help could untie things badly. Mickey and then Chris.
Yeah, I'd say as Stuart was mentioning, just polishing a turd kind of thing. But yeah, like very simple thing you can do is cut the excess lows, cut the excess highs, and do a presence boost at maybe at 6K maybe, because that's usually where the fundamental frequencies of at least in terms of presence and clarity of human voice is around 6K. It varies, of course. So in terms of understanding it would help a bit. But yeah, I wouldn't dive too much into it.
The RX stuff I've used a lot successfully. The most successful that I've been with really, really bad audio is the Synaptics Unveil. You know, it's the one that if you need to pull something out that really digs into something, that's the one that I've used in the past that's been the most effective. Next question.
Yeah, this one's interesting. Ken Jones from Seattle says, is there a way to export all the bits and pieces of an instance of an OBS lower third text, static JPEG images, etc., so that I can compare a live stream setup on different hardware without having to rebuild every scene?
Go ahead, Jason.
I believe it's just your, what is it? Users / I'm blanking, but it's basically your settings directory is going to maintain that, and you can actually pluck that out and put it elsewhere.
There you go. Next question.
I was going to say you also might be able to export the lower third as a PNG. Tony Adamopoulos from Missouri says, what are some tips for setting up a new monitor as best as possible for cheap and or free?
So I'm assuming what you're saying is you don't want to use some kind of meter, on the monitor to get it set up. If you're doing it on a Mac,
Unless it's a cheaper free meter.
I really feel like Apple really has simplified their monitor calibration tools to a point where they're useless. I can't even do it. They used to have this thing where they would show you a little circle and it would like make the grade this and make that, and it worked really well, I thought, to get something really close. And then they now have all these auto settings. I can't get to that. Like I still see the picture of the gray, but I can't get to the actual thing to do the correction. It's really frustrating. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Jason.
Is there a way to actually set a virtual color card on the monitor and then point a camera at it, or is that going
and then
to
you're measuring the camera?
dirty it?
You're measuring the camera.
Well, yeah, assuming the camera has been
no, but I mean,
right.
It won't work. Jason,
that's the wrong thing.
Spider X Elite costs, I believe, $200. If that's too much money for all of your monitors, then your eyes are your eyes.
You really need. I don't know how to do it well without a color meter. Go ahead, Stuart.
We're all delving into all of the technical side and missing the practical side. First thing, make sure that the monitor doesn't have direct sunlight pointed on it. Make sure that it is at a comfortable height so you're not bending down all the time. That will save you from having neck pain. Then adjust your height of your seat so that you're typing comfortably. Start with those basics, and then everything else that you do for the more technical thing becomes a lot more fruitful because you're sitting looking at the monitor from the correct point of view.
Yeah, and even something like an X-Rite, i1 display is $150. It's in that range, and I think that if you care that your monitor is calibrated, you're gonna need a piece of hardware to do that, in my opinion. And just you may not spend a ton of it. You might find it on eBay. You might find it for $100 or whatever. But I would get some piece of hardware if it really matters. Otherwise, just put a picture on there that you think and figure it out. but there's not going to be a cheaper or there's not going to be a really cheap or free way to do that. Next question.
Mike Burns from Spokane says, if you're doing a live event and you don't have access to fast Wi-Fi, what can you do that doesn't break the bank?
Well, you can use LTE. If you don't have fast, what do you have, I guess, is the question.
Well, let's say you're doing a live event from like a coffee house or a restaurant or something, it's going to be like okay Wi-Fi, but it's not going to be like killer Wi-Fi. And this is a total like newbie question. Like what is it you guys do when you go to remotes? I'm guessing you using some kind of software or service or something. And I don't know, you're pulling satellite signals. Like, what are you doing?
So what we do when we go to if we go to a bar or something like that, we're usually in touch with them a couple weeks ahead of time. And first thing we find out is, how fast is their connection? We don't really where is their router? Where is your router and how fast is your connection? And so does your router have any open ports? So we want to very quickly know what they have there. We want to know what their speed is. And so we ask them what the speed is. We want to know if we can get onto their router before it goes to basically, can we put a piece of hardware between their wireless and the WAN, so that we can basically carve off. And what we typically do when we do that is when we did it, I learned probably not to do what I did to the King's Cross again, which is shut the whole building down. Turns out a lot of people get really upset. So we got better at that. And the more refined way to do that is that we have an LTE, so we use an LTE modem inside of a router, whether it's a PepWave or a Meraki or something like that. We hand the house the LTE signal, because in the router we can say this port or all the Wi-Fi gets it from this source, and then we take it from the other source. So we take the Ethernet and we give everybody back Wi-Fi, because what we have found is that if people see their pages loading, no matter how slow, they may blame the house, but they're not going to blame us. They're going to go, oh, they have internet. It's just really slow, and there's a lot of people using it, even if it's like one Wi-Fi signal or one LTE signal or whatever. And so having like a little box, we've used PepWave boxes or Meraki boxes that have some kind of cellular capability in them that we can hand the house that and then carve the rest of it off for our own. And then if all of those things fail, you'd be surprised that, again, this is not something that doesn't break the bank, but if you call Comcast or AT&T and say, I need something installed in a week or 2 weeks or whatever, they'll say, no, we can't do that. And I said, is there some way we can pay for that to happen? And then turns out about $300, and they'll accelerate whatever they were gonna do if you pay them about $300. Then after that, the next level up from that is trying to get a wireless transmission. So it'll be Tower Stream or Monkey Brains here in San Francisco or something like that, where it's a point-to-point microwave signal. And then most of those are going to get backed up by a bonded solution like a live view. For us, I mean, that's what we're going to bond that solution. So usually it's two of those, one of the house and another bond and a wireless. And then the next step up from that is, a KU uplink, so a KU uplink truck. And if it's really important, it'll be a C-band uplink truck, which are really big trucks. So the C-band means that I don't care about the clouds. I don't care if it rains. I don't care if it, and then after that is the switch or LTN, usually the switch, where we drop the switch in, but you need a month of planning. And sometimes for the largest events that we do, it's all of them, so it'll be a bonded cellular, internet at the venue, C-band satellite uplink, and a fiber backhaul. And a good example of when that makes, when you can tell who spent money on what. During the DNC in 2016, we streamed both the RNC and DNC in 2016. There was a huge rainstorm, like crazy rainstorm in the middle of that convention. And you'll notice that the CNN lost their signal, ABC lost their signal, CBS lost their signal, everyone lost their signal, but the YouTube stream was still rock solid. So, and that's because I paid a lot of money to get a Vivix line out of the convention center. So anyway, so that's those are the different ways that we get out of venues. Jeffrey and then Garrick.
And there's still merit in doing live delay. If you can do 20-minute segments and then take that and put it into something that'll stream off-site.
It just depends if you have any interactivity.
It depends on if it's time sensitive or not, basically.
If it's not time sensitive, I wouldn't even bother with live streaming. I just record it and put it up. Garrick?
What's the cost approximately of a C-band sat truck?
A lot.
I've been talking to a film festival that's moving all outdoors to a park that has no internet, and so they're trying to find a solution.
And where you're in Missouri?
Yeah.
It depends. It literally depends on the day, oftentimes, and who you're dealing with. But the typically you're going to be able to find a KU for less. A KU is going to cost you somewhere between $4,000 and $7,000 a day to have that, to have that there. And that's not the bandwidth, that's the truck, right? The bandwidth is going to cost you another couple $100 an hour. And then if they have to have the converter boxes to turn it into bandwidth, if you want to have bandwidth on them, so there's not all the trucks will be able to convert to bandwidth. It'll just be, oh, you want video up, that's part of the truck. You want bandwidth, that's not part of the truck. So that comes separately. And then the C-band will typically, be somewhere between, 6,000 and 12,000 a day, somewhere in that range, for that. And again, the C-band is going to push through a skilled operator can push a KU signal through most clouds, most heavy clouds, and even a medium size amount of rain where you don't get rain fade. But it takes a lot. They really have to know what they're doing to get through it. C-band will just push through it. But it's a massive truck, to open that up, to have it. It's a thing to see. For a couple years, all we used was C-band, and so we got really used to C-band trucks, and it's a luxury. Stuart, and then Jason.
Just reading what Mike's written there. Doesn't have access to fast Wi-Fi, so I'm assuming we're also ruling out a wired connection, because that would be the first thing to chase.
Yeah.
If you're stuck using a mobile router that uses a cellular connection, double check what sort of aerials you've got on the back of it and see if you can pick up a 7 dB or a 20 dB boost aerial that'll just go onto that, and that will actually mean that your signal gets to the nearest tower better than everybody's mobile phones, and the tower will prioritize your signal over theirs. That might give you a bit of a hand as well.
The more cost effective way would be a live view, a live view bonded cellular with you get the extra extender, which will get you up to 14 modems. But the problem you end up with is if you have a lot of people in the same place, they'll still saturate the system. The other thing to look at is point to points. So again, I mentioned that there's services that do that, but some ISPs will do it as well. So if there's a line of sight from one of their towers to your location, you can throw it a Ubiquiti transmitter and push it straight. We did that for an event in Bend, Oregon. Go ahead, Jason.
I think I'll cover the only part that nobody else has said anything about, because Alex's answer was so thorough. In the past, what I've done is just take a Ubiquiti Edge router and a Netgear cellular modem and about 300 feet or so of Ethernet. And with a combination of those three, taking the venue or tapping a nearby venue by contract, I've been able to pretty much do just about anything.
But in the middle of nowhere, satellite trucks are the thing that we've used
in the middle of nowhere, hey, you got nothing but money. They're amazing.
Yeah. I mean, if you have the budget for it, satellite trucks are still pretty nifty. No, next question.
Next question is from Eddie Scott, said from Mission Viejo. Some people in Mukana mentioned a boundary layer mic, boundary effect mic. What is that?
I think it's a boundary mic. I think. Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
A boundary mic is a specific kind of condenser mic where it is using reflected sound. You'll see these a lot in like a high school gymnasium. Yeah, there you go. Guy has a perfect example of the AT. It's actually a decent one if you can isolate the bottom of it. It's basically it's an extremely sensitive microphone that's designed for reflective sound.
Go ahead, Marty.
So they were originally known as a pressure zone microphone. So it's designed to be placed on a large flat surface, originally on a stage floor as a foot microphone. And the idea is that as sound strikes the large surface, there's a zone of acoustic pressure that builds up, and the microphone picks that up rather than direct from the source like a regular microphone would. The boundary microphone that we just saw is actually a cardioid microphone, so it's directional, where the original pressure zones were omnidirectional. So these are good to use on a large flat surface. I've seen them used on the underside of the lid of a piano. I've seen them used on ceilings if they're low enough, on a wall, particularly on a conference room table. That's how they're used.
Yep, Greg.
Yeah, that was exactly right. I'm just going to add, I've seen them used in kick drums with great results. Also, lecterns was a pretty popular usage for them. Any table surface would be good.
The one thing you have to look out for on a table, though, is that any kind of noise that happens on the table, like somebody touches the table or puts a mug of coffee down.
Yeah, that will blow your head off.
All of that up.
Yep. Next question.
Tony Adamopoulos from Missouri says, for those using OBS, Streamlabs OBS, or generic OBS?
I don't know if we, yeah, go ahead, TJ.
I'm using the OBS I downloaded from Streamlabs website. Not sure there's a difference.
I think there is. I think they do their own version of it. Mickey?
Yeah, I'm just using plain vanilla OBS just because my use is super simple and basic.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Streamlabs provided skins for OBS to make it look more like whatever product you're used to. I couldn't find one that matched like the sort of vMix interface that I'm used to, so it's the generic OBS for me.
Go ahead, TJ.
Correction. I am using the generic OBS. Sorry.
There you go. Next question.
Ed Willick from Valley Cottage, New York says, what are the go-to network patch cables that the panel are using? I think a lot of people spend a lot of time talking about the right 10 gig switch, the right router, fast network storage, blah, blah, blah. But we don't talk much about the patch cables to connect it all.
Go ahead, TJ.
Monoprice. I have them from 1 foot to 100 feet, literally.
They have that thing down pat. Like they just, the one thing that you, like there's a lot of things I won't buy on Monoprice, like their audio cables or their HDMI cables, or there's other things I don't buy on Monoprice because I just don't feel, I feel like I've had a higher level of failure. But the one thing that I do not make or buy anywhere other than Monoprice is my Ethernet cables, because I've never had, knock on wood, never had anything fail, and they're super cheap and they show up quickly and they always have lots of them. So go ahead, Jason, and then Marty.
Yeah, consensus on the Monoprice, especially for patch cables. Just if for those of you that don't know, they now have 12G SDI cables. I've ordered them. I haven't tested them, but I've ordered them, and I don't know. We'll see.
I have found that everything is 12G under 50 feet. I mean, just about everything.
You're confuse people, Alex.
I know, but it's like everyone says 12G 6 foot cables. I'm like, they're all set. Everything made in the last 10 years is 12G at 6 feet. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, for shorter runs, I'd go Monoprice, like 2 or 3 meters or less. But for longer than that, I just make my own. But I do have 2 reels of EtherCon from Proco, which is I believe they're the house brand of Sweetwater.
Right.
An excellent source of high quality cables comes from Comprehensive. I just put the link in the Mukana.
They make a lot of generally good cables. Yeah, I think that they're. I don't know if they're competitive price wise with Monoprice as far as price to quality, but they're Comprehensive makes great cables in general. Next question. They're valuable. They're good valued cables. Monoprice are just so cheap. It's hard to even calculate like why you would do it. I mean, it's just like they all show up and they're all $1 each. Anyway, next question.
James Babbitt from San Diego says, hi, Alex. Is there an ideal size for office hours, including panelists and attendees? Could you discuss planning to grow to larger sized office hours meetings?
I don't think it's an ideal size as much as it is the panelist. I definitely think there's an ideal between 25 and 50. I think that as we get closer to 50, it becomes hard. We used to have a larger panel. I'm kind of glad that we settled into the panel size that we have. I think it's about right. I think that 25 to 40 is really if I would say a panel, that's kind of where I'd want to have it there. Under 20, we get stumped more often. Over 40, it gets just to be hard to manage. It's just, it's a harder. Now, I think that we could, as we get better, we're much better than the last time we were at 40 people. And so, I mean, what I mean is we're more disciplined as a panel. So I think that we could get there, but I think that each panelist has less time to say anything at 40 than at 25. So 25 to 40, I think, is the right size for the panel. As far as the size of the attendees, I think we just shift gears there's different sizes based on other events that we've worked on that we have to shift gears at different number of attendees. So at the current rate, we answer just about every question. We go through all the bits and pieces. There is some point between I think I've said this before, but once you go over 400 people, we would probably be leveraging more of, hey, you got to vote on the questions or we're not going to get to them all. And then also, excuse me, if we're talking about technical things, we could push some stuff off. Like if people start asking more basic questions answer them in text because there's an easy way to answer them so they don't all come to the surface. And then then we kind of move it another direction. And then once you get over about somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500, you start having to push out so that not everyone even sees all the questions. There's a different way to manage the questions so that you can load balance, the process. And then at that point, you just keep on growing that. But you can go, there's no limit to the number of attendees that we could support effectively. It's the number of panelists, though, is a more limited process. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I also think there's a little bit of a learning curve to being a panelist, and I think we've done that really well, and we're letting a lot of different people answer the questions, and nobody's dominating the the responses, and it's working out really, really well.
Well, and I think that also our pre-show and post-show are good because those are great places for people to come and experiment, and get used to being part of the panel without being on YouTube or being part of the whole thing. So I've seen quite a few people show up in the pre-show or show up in the pre-show and they eventually end up in the panel, which is amazing, but allows them to be comfortable without having to go onto a larger stage immediately. So that's part of the design of what we're doing with those, is to give people kind of a safer place to kind of experiment to get used to that process. Go ahead, Jason, and then Mike.
As far as the size of a community, I mean, the way that I think about it is like a Mayan stepped pyramid, where you end up with these phases of growth, and then a plateau, and then another level up. That to me is the right way to do it.
There'll always be people who said it was always better when we answered every question and when there was only an hour, and there'll be people who complain about the size of it. But on the other side of that is that as the attendee size gets bigger, the people that we can invite on and the amount of pressure that we can put on it and everything else, market pressure and so on and so forth, changes dramatically. At this certain number, we get a lot of attention. If there were 1,000 attendees, or 5,000 attendees, every manufacturer would show up here. This would be like where you launch products. So that's when, if we got to that would be, we at 5,000, my calculation, somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 would be the most important group in the industry. Like there's just no other place that every day you could go up and be in front of that many people that are decision makers, in the world when it comes to media and everything else. So getting to that number eventually, I'm in no rush, but when we get to that number, and Pixelcore was smaller than that. Pixelcore was at 2,000. We basically created our own weather system. Like there was people giving our members deals and all kinds of other things. Because when we pointed, we already showed the power of this small group. We sell out mics, we sell out things, we sell out. There's a lot of manufacturers that know who Guy is that ask me like, why is everyone buying this? And I'm like, because Guy's in the community, and we all, they see these spikes, that are related to this stuff already. So it's already measurable. But at 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 people, it gets to be the only thing that it's more important. It would be more important at 5,000 attendees. It would be more important to be here than NAB. So that's but that's all of us growing it to telling our friends and growing the community to get to that point. And again, I'm not trying to indiscriminately grow it. We need a little more infrastructure to handle that many people anyway. Go ahead, Mike.
Yes, I just want to add real quick. Makana is a fabulous tool that really works hand in hand well to this thing that we're doing, because I've asked some dopey questions that haven't quite made the cut, but a lot of people have answered it in Makana with the links, and it's awesome. So
yeah, it's great. Next question.
Again, Maranatha Spanish Church wants to know, Alex, how much memory in your mini kits? I think there's
8 gigs. Standard, what that you can buy at the store. I didn't see any reason to have more than 8 gigs for what I was doing, and I was right. It barely
for your remote kits.
For the remote kits.
Yeah.
No, for my remote kits, and I'm gonna buy a bunch of them that are like glue for my new kit that I'm building, and they'll be 8 gigs because I'm just not gonna spend more money on them. I don't need them to be 16 gigs to do the kind of things that I'm asking them to do. I will get 16 gig ones that are going to run other things, but but for the little bits and pieces that I'm doing, I'm not sure if I need to spend the money on it. Go ahead, Chris.
Can you explain the term glue, the way you use it when you're talking about building systems?
Yeah. So, I mean, scopes, like I'll have one of those minis, doing scope box and doing Spectre and doing, I don't know if it's really Spectre because I don't know if that can run on a mini, but doing the different scopes, doing, running. So I have a couple minis down here right now, which probably don't even need to replace. I'll replace them, but they run my switcher. So they run the telestrator, they run the selector, they interact with the switchers. And probably with a little bit of work, I could have an Arduino do that, or a Raspberry Pi. They're probably if anything, the Mac minis are a little bit of an overkill to do that, but I just don't want to,
they are a great overkill because they just fix so much about the interface.
And you can play around with things like, I'm overbuilding even with the Mac minis. And so running things, pushing things together, those kinds of things are glue. It's just, you barely need a computer for it. But it's nice to have one, that you can keep on. Here's the thing is you can definitely get an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi that will just do the thing, but that's all it will ever do. And if you're deciding, I want to do a different thing, having a Mac Mini is nice because you can do the different thing with it rather than getting a whole new, like having to refigure out how you're going to do everything. Go ahead, Hosmo.
What version of OS do you run on your Mac Minis?
The new ones are all Big Sur because they have to be, I think. I don't think you can run any.
Yes, they have to
Big
be.
Sur, yeah, so on the M1s, they're all Big Sur. And so again, I've been letting them sit for a little bit, and again, I'm also, a bunch of that move is going to all happen in January, February. My goal is to have kind of build up a year into it. So at March 25th, I have this little goal of like the Death Star is kind of half complete, of what we're doing here, like the hardware, studio that is there. But I want to have I have specific things I'm trying to do a year into the office hours of having, a nice little studio and a place that I have an idea for a lab, that probably will start in my garage. And, but like a lab that we can shoot stuff and talk about things and have cameras up and, I'm talking, for instance, to DSC Labs because I don't currently have the 24R chart. I have the little one that I showed you, but I don't have the bigger one. And so I want to show you guys how I calibrate cameras, but I'm not ready to buy $1,500 chart to do it. So, and because I can do it with my little one, but it's nicer with the bigger one. Anyway, so the idea is to have them send me one out and put it up in front of a camera, have a bunch of cameras that I can show, do, experiment with little jibs and process and talk to you guys about that. And so those are the kind of things I'm trying to build. But a lot of things need little communication things to be managed. And that's where the Mac Minis become useful. Anyway, next question.
Dennis from Winnipeg says, I'm trying to deal with COVID-induced tech addiction. Any suggestions for tech detox in 2021?
Go ahead, Stuart.
When COVID becomes zombied and society falls, there will be no electricity, so you will have no problems detoxing.
Go ahead, Jason.
Zombid. I love it. Here's my advice that is tech adjacent. Get into audiobooks. Really, get into audiobooks. Get a Walkman if you have to get into audiobooks without any tech.
Mine is cooking. So so one of the things I'm taking on this year, it's been a slow, drawn out persuasion with my wife, but at least during the weekdays, we're going to go to single ingredient cooking, which means that we're not going to buy anything at any store that has more than one ingredient. So you have to buy raw ingredients for everything. So you don't buy anything in a box, anything with two ingredients, you don't buy. And I've been working on this for a year and a half. My wife is, I think, mostly signed on to it. As long as it's okay to do some stuff on the weekends. But if you want bread, you make bread, but you start with flour and salt and, all that stuff. And so I find
So the flour can contain only flour, the salt can contain only salt. That's the
Yep.
idea.
You still put together complicated things together, but you're doing that, you know, and you're not having somebody else process it for you. It's as much of a, anyway, it's understanding what you're eating, but it's healthier. And finally, I find it to be therapeutic. You know, like this morning, I got up this morning and I made, to give you a sense of it, while you guys were talking at 5 o'clock in the morning, I made basically a paratha breakfast burrito, but I made it all from scratch. I literally threw some flour in, you know, flour and water and yeast, and then I put it in a little ball and I set it down, and then I came here and I started up the 5 o'clock thing, and then I went back and it had risen a little bit, and I subdivided it and crushed it, you know, smashed it all out and threw it on a pan, and I made some bacon, and bacon's technically not single ingredient, but anyway, but you know, and then cooked a bunch of things into it and built it all up from scratch, and it was really good. You know, and there's something about it when you build it. Number one is you made it, but it all tastes better. Like the one thing, if you get good at cooking, it all tastes better all the time. Like it all tastes better. Like we do this all day, every day, and then we have somebody else feed us cardboard. You know, like because everything is like when you get used. Like we now make pizzas. My wife makes pizzas, and I make the crust. But that pizza is better than almost any pizza I've ever had every single time we make it, you know, and we keep on changing the recipe just a little bit, and it keeps on getting better. So what I will say is that I think cooking is probably, in my opinion, one of the number one ways to like balance out your tech. It's because it takes time, and it takes your hands, and it takes things, and you got to think about it. And going down to single ingredient, not cutting any corners, just means, it does take more time. It's probably good for you to take more time to work on it, you know, and you make mess and you do, you know, it's not perfect, and you fail a lot. And it's, you know, there's a lot of things that are all part of that. And I think that us getting reconnected to that is important as a human species, as the species. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, to your point, and to Hasmik's point of, you know, looking inward and then going to the origin, you might have inspired me to actually think about gardening.
Gardening's the next thing.
Well, that's actually physically getting your hands in the dirt, and the therapeutic of getting away from tech, and you get to eat it because it's going to be fresh. So I'm going to learn about bugs.
This spring we're getting chickens. Next spring I think we're going to get goats. So that's our next little bit of piece. Anyway, TJ.
Roosters, just stay away from roosters.
No, I'm getting the rooster. The rooster's the best part.
So gardening, as Sky said, there is something really therapeutic about just getting your hands in the dirt and playing in the dirt. We used to do that when we were kids. We just go play in the dirt, and there is something mentally getting you back to that. And I saw Chris hold up his tall maker, and yes, making sawdust is a fun thing. Although that is somewhat technical sometimes if you got good power tools.
Sawdust is religion.
Yeah. Just making things, like making physical things, whether it's metal or wood or gardening or food or whatever. There's a lot of that stuff that is, you know, there's something about it that's therapeutic. And I think it's a great question, because I think a lot of us get caught up in spending too much time on a screen for no apparent reason. Like we're filling time. And my whole thing is, I'm going to fill, like we're tired. Like what I do when I'm tired is I cook, because it's like I don't have to think that hard about how to make bread anymore or how to make whatever. It's like, you know, just something I can do while I'm not doing something else, you know. And so I think that anyway, I think that it's a really useful thing. It's a really useful, especially end of the year kind of thing to think about. Go ahead, Peter.
I was going to say my thing is I go sailing, and I truly mean sailing, not a motorboat. The challenge of sailing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Hiking is also good, like actually getting out where you hear things. And
so Jason, is it cheating to take an iPad to the woods?
No, not even a little bit.
An iPad, but an iPod into the woods. You know, listen to audiobooks.
I wouldn't make any rules about it.
I was going to say, I do a lot of stuff with the Scouts, and we pretty much have rules to say, leave your technology at home. You're outside.
I wouldn't say I wouldn't make any rules about it, but I would say that it's much more fulfilling not to have any of that stuff. You know, like just turn it all off.
I'm going to start twitching now, though.
I know it's good. It's good. Marty and then Stuart.
So learning to play an acoustic instrument like guitar or mandolin or some
Imbira.
sort of a drum like djembe, something you can hit, get some aggression out.
I find the Imbira very pleasing to learn. You just have to get used to the first 6 weeks. Your fingers are bloody. It's metal. It's like metal. Like you have to develop really thick skin to do it. I haven't done it. I let it go for a while, and now it hurts. So, but Imbira, like a classic Zimbabwean Imbira. I mean, you can also play with other ones, but it's nice because it's small. It sits on your desk, and you can sit there every time you're rendering and play it. So, anyway, Stuart.
Just
and ukulele.
What Sky was
ukulele.
Just on what Sky was saying about wearing the headphones with the walk in the woods and what have you. Have you people not seen horror films? This is how you end up being bear food.
Yeah. Anyway, but all of those things. I think that we definitely, as a group, are always at danger of getting disconnected from the world, and I think and disconnected from the creation process of making things. And I think that contributes to a lot of things, depression, upset, frustration, all those things, because you don't know how to do those things. And so I'm very glad. I don't think I was very glad when I was a kid. I pretty much knew that the one thing I didn't want to do is grow up and work on a farm, like I was pretty much, but I'm really glad that I had that experience. But at the time I didn't think it was a great experience, but I think that it was a very useful one. Go ahead, TJ.
Also, there's this thing made out of dead trees, and it's really, really fun.
That's going too far, as far as I'm concerned. Too far. You've now gone over the edge. Next question.
Our own Mike Burns from Spokane says, my 5.1 man cave has been converted into a gym. Looking for an awesome soundbar recommendation. Are wireless 5.1 systems worth it?
Go ahead, TJ.
Robert Heron of Heron Fidelity and AVXL has spoken very highly of the Sonos Arc soundbar. He really likes that a lot. There's also a Vizio soundbar as well that also has a wireless option where you can get wireless surround speakers. He also likes that a lot. And yes, a wireless 5.1, if it's all put together, can be worth it. It's better than none at all.
The one that the folks that I work with that make surround sound, when people talk about sound bars, the one that comes up the most often is the Sennheiser Ambio soundbar. It's expensive. It's $2,500, but it is the one that comes up over, and like literally every person that does surround that I've talked to, that when they say you want to get a sound bar and you're not getting discrete speakers, they're like, that's the one. You get that one, and it's 80% or 70% of what discrete speakers are from their perspective. Go ahead, Marty, and then Jason.
So I was reading these reviews that Vizio came out with a soundbar they call Elevate, which is a 5.1.4 Atmos, where the speakers at both ends actually rotate vertically to give you the upper level sound, and it sounds really fascinating.
And the Sennheiser one is a 514 using reflection. Mickey?
What I always hear about are, as Alex mentioned, the Sennheiser Ambio, and also, I don't know exactly which model, but Yamaha soundbars are pretty popular.
Yep, Jason?
The only thing I'll add to that, because I'm not going to repeat what's already been said, is that I believe that the days of Sonos are largely behind us. They sound fantastic, but they're not worth what they cost.
Yep. Next question.
Our own Tony Mobley from Newman, Georgia says, this may be a stupid question, but how do you keep your setups clean? A lot of dust here. Cleaners or dry wipes?
DJ and then Stuart.
This is not a stupid question. My house is incredibly dusty for some reason. I have a small Dyson vacuum that I use and suck up stuff. I hate dusting.
Yeah, you go ahead, Stuart, and then Jason.
Little known bit of trivia. A lot of what we perceive as dust around the house is dead skin cells.
I hear it's 70 to 80%.
It's always a good idea. Yeah, it's a good idea to keep it clean. Now, for cleaning screens and what have you, yes, a dry cloth with some cleaning agent on it is okay for most screens, but be careful of, like, especially the shiny surface screens. Some of them don't react well because of the types of plastics they are. A set of artists' paintbrushes, especially the fine ones, are great for getting in underneath the keys on keyboards to get the little bits of dust out from underneath the keyboards, but use them with a blower rather than a vacuum, so you blow the stuff away from you.
Go ahead, Jason.
I'm going to give you some really obvious advice. Do not use a can of air. That stuff is toxic and it's expensive, and you have to show a driver's license because people huff it. Go to Walmart, go, just about anywhere, an art supply store, and get a 2 to 3 gallon compressor. Yes, it's a little bit loud, but it'll actually create the PSI that you need to properly push air. I would say that, and the Dyson, I have basically the Dyson Dust Buster. The combination of those two is wonderful.
Next question.
I'm still freaked out by 70 to 80% of this being skin.
It's skin.
Oh, it's a fact.
Liberty White from Atlanta and Toronto says, what are the best tools, software or product that you've used to integrate into a live stream show to fundraise? Something like pledging.com, but for general market.
The one that we've used, the probably that's generated the most revenue is that Facebook has one that is a donate button. But you have to register and there's a bunch of paperwork and process and everything else to get the okay to use the donate button. So it's not something you can just turn on. But if you go through the process of it, and then you have to work with a provider that can actually execute the donate button, which we were. That's why we did a lot of it. And I believe that YouTube has the same thing built in. But outside of that, you can also use things like Stripe with like on Squarespace. People can hit a donate button and go in and use their market. Go ahead, Chris.
Does anybody know, let's say I'm running a 501c3 and I ask people to donate. I'm assuming Facebook takes a part of that.
I actually don't think they do. I think that if I remember correctly, the donate button is something that they do.
Doesn't sound like Mark Zuckerberg.
Well, no, it's building that relationship, and it's giving you a reason to build groups inside of Facebook, and it's it's part of the ecosystem. But I actually don't think if you're a 501c3 with the donate button, I think that both Facebook and YouTube, I don't think they take anything out of it. They might take credit card processing charges, but it's like raw charges. Like they don't want to make money on it. They want to build relationships with those organizations, and so it's a different approach that they have to that specific vertical.
I'm assuming they've figured out the tax implications of it, but interesting.
Yeah. Jason and then Mike.
Almost exactly what you said is my understanding of it. PayPal, I believe, will charge transaction fees, but that their PayPal, of course they do. I don't believe that the big syndicates do.
Mike.
So I'm just curious. I do have a friend who's got a YouTube page. It's pretty popular. So when you go to YouTube and people are live streaming and you see a crap ton of questions and then suddenly they donate money and then that question then becomes.
But that's not donate. Like that's not 501c3 donate.
Yeah.
That's like I paid for you to. I'm paying to be a super user, so that those questions rise to the top.
Right. Is that Patreon though that's processing that, or is that built into YouTube?
YouTube has
it's
it
Google
built
Pay.
into it. Yeah. And then you can't. Yeah. So. But otherwise, those are the only ones that I know of. We're going to get pretty good at it here, so we'll figure that out. Next question.
I just love that Jason called YouTube and Facebook a syndicate.
Whoopsie!
Next question.
David Brady from New York says, I followed a guide that Hasmuk and Mickey posted on Discord. Is there any reason for using OBS if the same routing can be handled using NDI scan converter or NDI virtual input to pick off the WLM window?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I'm curious, like with the NDI scan converter, are you able to pick up just an area of the window? Because say like right now with WLM, I'm just showing like maybe just over half of the window, so that at least the numbers appear bigger on screen instead of showing the complete WLM window.
Mickey, if you grab the NDI virtual input from vMix's website, you can actually define what device or what web page or what
Does that run on Mac?
is grabbed.
Yes, it does.
I don't run Macs.
All right. Next, go ahead, Hosmak, and then teaching.
Yeah, sorry, I saw this question on Discord. My answer was I'll leave it to Mickey.
Go ahead, TJ.
Is an NDI bad for use? Would never use it in production, right?
I don't use it in production, but I think that if you're working on it, I'm just answering the question that's as it's presented. I don't need to give everybody my opinion about NDI every time they ask about it. If they ask about NDI, we'll answer the question in context.
Don't you need to give your opinion?
I don't.
I'm kidding.
Next question.
Last question here. Mike Burns from Spokane says, has anybody tried the live streaming app Melon? melonapp.com. I believe it's owned by Facebook. Makes me nervous.
The web page actually says they're from Streamlabs, not Facebook.
Yeah, I don't think it's owned by Facebook. I think it's Streamlabs, and so I haven't used it. So it's it looks interesting. Looks like it's worth testing. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, if it does, then it should, but it doesn't, so it shouldn't.
Right. So that was quite an answer there.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so, but it looks interesting. So it looks like something that is probably cobbled on top of AWS to make it easier for you to use. So anyway, but I think that it's probably worth testing. It has some comparisons to Restream and StreamYard. It'd be interesting to see if it does things like for me, the one reason that we're looking at StreamYard specifically is because of the ability to stream to LinkedIn. So, but I think there's a couple things now that can do that. So that's been the thing that we've been considering in the new year. So we went really heavy. I was going to go a little heavy, and then we went really heavy, but we can go a little over. But I can't go over actually. Hold on, let me see here. Oh no, I have another meeting. So the thing to think about, and we can talk about this on Discord and everything else, is the kind of things that we want to see in Zoom. So we're going to have starting next Monday, we'll start talking using Mondays. We'll see how long it goes. If it's useful, we'll focus that second hour on Zoom questions and Zoom discussions. Those have been some of the most popular ones that we've done as far as second hours go when we bring them up. And so as a result, I kind of we'll have some subject matters, but I think that a lot of times I'm planning to experiment with it where we're not trying to fill a whole hour on something like Zoom rooms or whatever. We have general discussion, but there's going to be some point where we have general discussion, but then there is some point halfway through that we switch over. Okay, we're going to talk about this one thing, so we can, there's a place where people can ask questions about Zoom. And then there's another part where we're going to talk about something specific like Zoom rooms or webinar or, like something specific or examples. One of the things I do want to do is do breakdowns where we do examples of things that we're doing in Zoom. And we talk about what's working, not working, and what we wish we had. And I think at least once a month, we'll talk about what we wish we had. We'll make sure that John's here. That's Sky.
Well, I just noticed yesterday the aspect, sorry, sun came in my face. I wasn't used to that. Mm-hmm. The asking of a question at a certain time and outside of a category gets a different response depending on who's in the audience. And right. Guy and I both asked a question that were kind of philosophical yesterday, and it was just interesting to watch them ride up and down and then finally make it back into the it's worth listening to question.
Well, so part of it is
weird. It was an interesting thing.
Part of it is that having a time that we say we're going to talk about Zoom in general means that people that are really into Zoom know that if you're going to show up one time in the week to answer questions in the panel or whatever, we see that a little bit with the audio section, where there's certain people that just show up for the audio Q&A and not necessarily every day for the panel. And so people know that, we're going to have a Zoom discussion. That's the time that we're going to do that.
Well, and that's where the curating also is kind of critical, so that when I do need an answer to that question, I would then have someplace to go, but I don't have to go there then because that wasn't my need at that moment.
Right.
It's a thought. So verticals are very helpful. Thank you.
But I think that having, and I think that will definitely be a place. I do think that I'm not really clumping this in. I think I had a couple people ping me actually about this. I'm not looking at this being a replacement for doing something on Saturday with Zoom OSC, which I think is going to be more of that kind of lab discussion with those guys, because I think that that's more of a how-to. I think there's a couple things that I want to, as we rethink what we're doing. Zoom OSC is one. We have the actual developer handy oftentimes here now, so that's its own little experiment of working directly with a developer with their product, and then of course the Resolve stuff we'll be working towards, where we have the experts really answering questions while we're working through that stuff together. So those will be, but I'm going to kind of flip it. The thing that I felt like didn't work as well in the Saturday sessions was really the demos. Like having like for instance, Steve Bays have to do a demo and prep it and make it all work and then do it in front of us. When really what would have been, I still feel like, and people can argue, but I would have rather had Steve just do a quick demo of how to do something and then have us discuss it the next day.
Well, there's
have us watch it. That's like
memory,
the homework.
That muscle memory. Yes, the homework and that muscle memory thing of now I know where that button is because I physically pushed it, and that's
well. And if I gave like Steve material he can use, so he doesn't have to use his own, and then he puts a little thing together, and then people who are interested try it out. So if that gets posted on Monday, let's say, and then people try it out during the week, and even if 5 or 6 try it out, it'll be enough to create a conversation around, and so, yeah, go ahead, Peter.
I'm just curious if you think you'll have, when we do the Zoom sessions, if we can help influence some decisions they're struggling with. And
we do all the time. John's brought it up a couple times that our group definitely influences Zoom pretty directly.
Okay, because I keep struggling with, why is Zoom presenting me on my DeckLink quad card 50 different choices for an input media for each input versus Memo Live, which lets me pick the input source and then adjust accordingly.
Yeah. I think that A, we need to figure out how we do that, and B, how do we want to make a request? And I think that's because I think we as a group making requests like that this week, we're all going to make a request to have that fixed. We'll definitely push it up the ladder.
I've had it in for 4 months.
But we haven't all decided that over the next week we're going to all request that it gets fixed. That's a different thing than having time and intensity are two different things. Go ahead, TJ.
It was suggested to me that when you make a request for feature or bug for Zoom, if you can phrase it in such a way that it applies to education, meaning it's going to hit the biggest user base of Zoom right now, that will get more attention.
Yeah. And part of getting what you asked for is putting it in, getting other people to put it the same thing in, and also be incredibly specific. Like this is exactly, the more work you put into a request, the faster it gets fixed. But also the more intensity, the more people ask for it, also has an impact on that. I have to, if we're going to do a post show, I have to jump right now. so I'm going to dump this and jump into the post show real quick. Because I have to go to a 9:00 here, and I don't want to be late for that. So thank you all. And I know that went way heavier. I think I wasn't paying as much attention. I think I was just into the show. I think we were very relaxed, and we just kind of went through the show. We may be more relaxed on these shows this week, just because it's the end of the year, and I'm having a good time just kind of hanging out and answering questions and talking through it. So anyway, jumping into the post show. If for those of you that are in